welcome to HT's weekly talk show, The Interview. With 5 states going to polls, focus has now shifted to the Election Commission. There are concerns about the spread of COVID. Is it right to hold elections amid the pandemic? Could they be postponed? Is the Commission partisan? And as Mamata Banerjee said, an extension of the BJP. In this edition of HT's weekly talk show, The Interview, we have with us Mr. Shahabuddin Yaqub Quraishi, formerly Chief Election Commissioner, to discuss this. Welcome to the show, Mr. Quraishi, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Let me begin with evoking former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. T.N. Seshan. Do you think he would be turning in his grave, seeing the state of affairs today?
Well, you know, it will be a little awkward for me to comment on this because I was also heading that institution, and any criticism of the institution makes me uncomfortable. But there is no doubt that Mr. Seshan was an iconic figure. He gave his spine to the institution, which the institution still has. So, but then there is a difference between institutional spine and individual incumbent spine. So that is what creates problems sometimes.
What do you think Mr. Seshan would have done were he alive and in charge?
Well, Mr. Seshan would not have bothered about the establishment, would have shown no sign of any fear, which unfortunately is missing these days. He put the fear of God in the minds of the politician, the authority, the government of the day, and that which is why Election Commission became very, very respectable. And that is the reputation we have all enjoyed subsequently. The power which we got in Mr. Session's time, we benefited from it, but at the same time making sure that we not allow this to get diluted. So the moment we falter on that, that is where things go wrong.
Do you think that reputation which you speak about, and we all, of course, accept, has taken an irreparable hit?
I give a lecture all around the world, and one of the slides I have is a collage of media headlines after the 2009 general election. Well done, EC. Congratulations, EC. EC, your victory. EC, EC, EC. Everyone praising, including your newspaper and all the top newspapers. Spontaneously, you all appreciated the Election Commission. I have collected in the last 2 years the kind of headlines, about 30, 40 of them. And every time I read them, I feel depressed. And same newspapers, same media. And if they are critical, so surely something is amiss, something is going wrong, and we need to be worried about. And as a former CC myself, I feel personally, whenever there is an attack on Election Commission, I feel somebody slapping me. So it does hurt me, and I feel not only concerned, not only as a citizen, but as a former CC, that this is what is happening to an institution.
What do you make of the Election Commission's statement about holding elections because, quote unquote, all political parties wanted them to be held?
I think Election Commission just made a statement of fact that all political parties demanded it. But to me, actually, their demand was irrelevant. Whether they demanded election or they demanded postponement, there was no option because the holding election is a constitutional mandate, and the Election Commission had no choice. Suppose some parties were saying postpone the election, do you think the Election Commission would have done it? They could not, because the constitutional mandate is that at the end of a tenure of the Vidhan Sabha or Parliament, automatically on the last day, the House stands dissolved, and Election Commission is mandated to hold the election, prepare the next House before the last date, so that there is not a gap of a single day. Today the House gets dissolved, tomorrow the new House is ready.
But Mr. Quraishi, when you say there is no option, there is a provision in the Constitution that in case of an emergency, the Parliament can definitely think in terms of postponing or recommending a postponement in elections?
Yeah, you are right. Only in emergency, election can be postponed, which means the term of the House can be extended. The language used, the term of the House can be extended by presidential proclamation ratified by Parliament. But emergency is clearly defined in the Constitution. Only three situations: war, external aggression, and internal rebellion or insurgency. So these are three conditions, and because of the third condition, only 3 times in India's history elections have been postponed. Only 3 times. Once in Assam, the second time in Punjab, and third time in J&K. And you know the insurgency situation, it was impossible to hold elections those days in those states, which is why Parliament extended the term, and it was not Election Commission's option. Not 1 day delay has happened on account of Election Commission ever in the last 70 years.
But you know, this, when you say a war, this is a war on lives. And don't you think a health emergency like the one we have witnessed in the past 2 years is worse or maybe grave enough as a war?
Well, two things. Number one, if it is grave enough, it's like a war, the Constitution should be amended. Amend the law, amend the Constitution and include pandemic. Now, secondly, whether the pandemic is serious enough to warrant such a thing. Well, it was serious enough last year, more serious than now, because last year we did not even know what COVID is and how to deal with this. We had no infrastructure, totally, we were at a loss, the whole world. And there were 100 countries which went for election, even in COVID, with the guidelines. Some kind of an opinion was being built up after one High Court judge said that election should be postponed or the rallies should be banned. Now, clubbing the two, I think is a misjoinder, because banning the rallies is a child's play. It's a very small thing. Election Commission can do it in 30 seconds. But banning the rally, postponing the election, is impossible. It is not in their powers.
While on courts, you spoke about the Allahabad High Court. Let me take you back to the Madras High Court, which it said the commission officials should be tried for murder. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that was a very uncalled for and a harsh statement, and very irresponsible statement coming from a court. Because well, the lakhs of people were affected by COVID. For now, what about murder against the charge against the government? So I think that was an uncalled for, irresponsible statement.
You also spoke about banning rallies, and you said it's child's play. Do you think this temporary ban, which has been enforced by the Election Commission, is cosmetic after the fire has actually spread?
Well, I don't know whether to use that word, but it is. It certainly baffles me that the ban on rallies is only for 1 week. What will happen after 1 week? What is being anticipated that the problem would have disappeared and rallies would become possible? So keeping that margin for a review just after a week makes me uncomfortable, frankly, because the rallies should have been banned. Another question mark I have is that while the rallies have been banned, but public meetings are allowed. Now, what to me, there is hardly any difference between a public meeting and a rally. Probably rally is another word for a public meeting where more people are expected to turn up. But imagine a top leaders public meeting. Do you think there will be any difference? There will be lakhs of people there. The idea is to prevent crowding. And whether it's a public meeting or a rally, actually it means the collection of crowd, which is impossible to regulate. Rally and public meeting should not be differently viewed. They amount to the same thing. So now every rally will now be called public meeting. So that will not achieve the purpose for which this ban has been imposed. So therefore, I feel that this artificial distinction should be removed, and both kind of gatherings should be banned.
So then you would now agree when I use the word cosmetic is probably right.
Well, yeah, quite right. I think you forced me to say that. Yes, it is.
On the other hand, there is little evidence to show that rallies or public meetings for that matter are super spreaders, because Maharashtra and Delhi have the highest number of cases and there is no election here. That is another argument which is being given.
Any crowd is a super spreader. One more question mark I have, that they have also banned cycle rallies. Personally, I feel that the cycle rallies should have been allowed as an alternative. If I was there, I would have not only allowed it, but encouraged it, because, the cyclists 5-7 feet apart and for 1 kilometer will create the kind of impact. But instead of gathering crowds, people will watch that rally from their rooftops, from their balconies. The impact of a festivity will get created without creating the risk of the crowd gathering. So that should have been allowed and encouraged as an alternative.
Talking politically, don't you think that would be disadvantage ruling party? Because it's kind of unthinkable for the Prime Minister or his cabinet colleagues to be cycling to seek votes or using a motorcycle, while it's easier for the opposition to do it.
Well, no, fair enough, absolutely. But when we talk of rallies, it is not that the top leaders are on the cycle and or motorcycle themselves. Well, Prime Minister can be in his bulletproof car in the front, and he can be followed by 5, 7, 10 kilometers of motorcycles. So it will create a great impact, and while taking care of the safety. So that probably should answer your question.
The Election Commission in one sense is toothless. So even when one says that guidelines must be adhered to, they are willfully flouted election after election. So what is the point?
This charge of toothlessness has been thrown at Election Commission ever since I can remember. There are certain ways in which perhaps it is toothless. For instance, the model code, you cannot sentence anybody. You can only just charge sheet and censure or reprimand and warn. Don't be careful in future. Don't do it again. And people call Election Commission toothless for this. So, but at the same time, actually, Election Commission institutionally has teeth. Institutionally, it has great backbone. So, but institutional backbone and institutional teeth and incumbents' teeth and backbone, they are different. So individuals have to show the backbone also, so they have to show spine, they have to show teeth. It's a question of enforcement. And if Election Commission has come under different kinds of comment in the last 2-3 years, it is not for nothing, because surely, after all, what had they split in the Election Commission was on the enforcement only. One member wanted the enforcement of the model code strictly. He was overruled and outvoted, and the rest is history. So
you won't agree that these guidelines are really only on paper, or the institutional thing which you talk about, and you feel that if the Election Commission wants, it can go that extra mile to crack the whip.
Correct. And I don't think it has to go extra mile. It has to use its powers. In fact, the Ashok Lavasa incident, which I referred to, what happened was that there are 5-7 cases, and for 25 days, the Election Commission took no view. An institution is as strong or as weak as the incumbent.
But another point is that what good is action after damage is done? A rally is held, they woo the voters, and the politician moves on. And then you can take action, but he has achieved what he or she wanted to. So what good is that after the fire has spread?
You're quite right. That is why the model code, because if we depend only on the laws of the land, we give a notice, file an FIR, and wait for a court judgment after 10 years. So the difference between the law and the model code is here, it's totally summary. we hear a complaint or we see something, some violation and give a notice to reply within 24 hours.
But you know, when you say 24 hours action time, I accept that. And if it was so stringent, then why is it that rally after rally, in every election, the model code of conduct is actually violated?
You know, if you are referring to the previous elections, particularly West Bengal, there was no ban on the rallies. In fact, the criticism of the Election Commission was that they should have banned it. There was a demand going on, being voiced from every quarter, ban the rallies. They did not, till the sixth phase. And when things went totally out of control, and actually I feel that when the leaders themselves got exhausted and finished their rallies, then within half an hour, Election Commission banned it. They should have banned it 15 days earlier, after the first phase, second phase, when they were seeing what was happening. So that was a human weakness, not the Election Commission's institutional weakness.
Yeah, sure. I take that point. But in COVID times, banning rallies is one option, or perhaps the only option. But otherwise, also in normal times, the model code of conduct has usually been violated.
Well, it gets violated, no doubt. But then the prompt action ensures that the violation is minimized. I'll give you one very nice example, positive example. Mr. Manohar Parrikar was the chief minister and there was a by-election going on. And we heard that in the middle of the by-election, he was going to elevate the lady candidate to minister. I sent him a message through the chief electoral officer, requesting him, advising him, informal personal advice, that will disturb the low level playing field. Mr. Parrikar called me next morning, very angry. He said, Mr. Quraishi, that's my constitutional right, my sovereign right to appoint anybody as minister. How can you question? I said, Mr. Parrikar, I'm not questioning your right. Surely you have the right. I'm just pointing out that this may disturb level playing field and you may consider, if you like, postponing the elevation of the lady. You know, his statement which he made was like a statesman. He says, I surrender my sovereign right to appoint a minister to the dignity of the model code of conduct, and he postponed it. So that is the kind of statesman-like behavior, responsible behavior we expect from a senior politician.
Mr. Quraishi, that is history. And don't you think in current times, that history is unlikely to repeat itself?
Let us be optimistic, because there are always ups and downs in history. There are good things happening also. But, you know, if I may suggest, Kumkumji, one institutional safeguard that is required. You know, the most powerful commission in the world, which is India's Election Commission, has the most defective system of appointment. We are appointed by the government of the day without consultation with the opposition. Nowhere in the world, believe me. Everywhere, the least they have is a collegium. But in many countries, there is complete parliamentary scrutiny. In fact, the candidates are interviewed on the national television. The whole nation watches. So that the persons finally appointed are acceptable to the entire nation. Here, the government of the day appointed, and I came from the same procedure. And as CEC, I used to say I would have felt stronger if leader of opposition was also signatory to my appointment. Secondly, what will be the impact? Because the two election commissioners, their elevation as CEC should be automatic by seniority. First, they should be appointed through collegium, so that there is a stamp of approval of all parties, and then their elevation should be automatic by seniority. Otherwise, they feel like they are on probation. They're looking over their shoulder. Is the government happy with me? Will they elevate me? Now, that is where the trouble comes, where the two election commissioners can overrule the CEC 5 times a day, because the CEC is protected from removal. He can only be removed through impeachment, but the other two, their elevation is dependent on the government. So they may try to please the government. So that has to be institutional check. You know, we cannot just hope that they will not do that. Now, hope is never a strategy. You have to have institutional checks.
You know, last year, retired bureaucrats and diplomats, some of them, had spoken about the election commission being weak-kneed and suffering from a crisis of credibility?
Well, the fact that 200 people with so much of experience felt that way, so there would have been a good reason. So, and in fact, don't we know the reason? Ashok Lavasa incident is the best proof. Why go outside? Within the institution, there was some disapproval of what was going on. So, I think that the civil servant had a point.
Would you also say that the Election Commission is partisan, if I may use the term, because there are allegations of the EC treating the ruling party with kid gloves? And as Mamata Banerjee said, it is an extension of the Bharatiya Janata Party.
You know, this is a very sad statement and very disturbing statement to make and to hear. And as I said, the reply, the answer only is an institutional mechanism.
You know, you said it is a sad statement, but is it factual?
Surely there is no smoke without fire. They see action is not being taken. For instance, the most infamous case was when 5-7 cases of model code violation were not acted upon. For 25 days, Election Commission was sitting on it. It was unpardonable, for which the court came down heavily. And in fact, when the court makes a strong statement against the Election Commission, it hurts me personally. It feels like a slap. So why should we do such a thing which will encourage the courts and the media or the people or the political parties to make these kind of nasty comments?
So Mamata Banerjee is right when she says the Election Commission is an extension of the BJP.
Well, that may be a very, very strong statement and political statement, though I would rather not comment on it. But like they say that not only an institution, whether it is Election Commission or Supreme Court or High Court, not only it should be neutral and strong, it should appear to be neutral and strong, and anything which comes in the way of that happening needs to be addressed.
Mr. Quraishi, let me come to another point about polarization and elections. How do you see it? How do you look at it? In fact, in one of your recent books, you have spoken about this. So just take me through that.
You know, we have noticed for the last 20 years, polarization as an electoral strategy is becoming the norm, particularly of a party. Now, Gujarat election onward. In fact, I personally feel that Gujarat election, accidentally they discovered this, that anti-Muslim feeling they will polarize the Hindu votes, and they started then developing it further, and it had continued to pay dividend. Hum panch hamare 25, hum char hamare 40. Oh, and people lapped it up and they loved it. Hum panch hamare 25 means every Muslim has 4 wives, 25 children, or 4 wives and 40 children. Now, this slogan has penetrated the minds of the people so much that and created fear among the minds of the Hindus that Muslims are multiplying very fast to capture political power.
In your book, you had spoken about this.
Yes, I wrote a book called Population Myth, Islam, Family Planning and Politics in India, where I have dealt with the various myths, and one of which is that now polygamy is a myth. You as a media person, Kumkumji, you are aware that there is a gender ratio is adverse against the women. For 1,000 men, there are 920 or 930 women. 70 men do not even have one wife. Where will I get my second, third, and fourth wife? It's impossible. Secondly, there is a study of Government of India itself, old study, 1975, the only study done, which examined whether polygamy is confined only to Muslims, what is the status of polygamy, and they found almost every community, in fact, every community has some degree of polygamy. Tribals 15%, Buddhists, Jains, Hindus, and the least polygamous were the Muslims. So factually, polygamy is the least among the Muslims. The impression they're trying to create, every Muslim has 4 wives. I want to have 4 wives. Where will I get them? Because they do not exist. So this kind of absolute untruth being spread at the top level and repeated ad nauseum. So this is leading to polarization, to the extent that yesterday one leader said it is a question of the fight between 80-20. Now who is 20 and who is 80? Obvious reference is to Hindus and Muslims and other minorities. So now these, I hope Election Commission comes down heavily on this kind of a speech.
So finally, Mr. Quraishi, what would your advice be to the Election Commission, having headed it yourself at this point in time? And finally, what should be and is not, and what is it that you would have done during the second surge of COVID and the current third wave, which is knocking at the door?
I would have banned the rallies completely instead of tentatively for just for 1 week, because that keeps the pressure also open. So that should have been clinched. And what can I advise? They are very experienced and sensible people, and they know what is expected of them. They know the constitutional mandate, and surely it's a question of showing the spine and then the backbone which is expected of institutions of this kind, like judiciary and election commission.
Mr. Shahabuddin Yaqub Quraishi, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for setting the record straight.
Thank you very much, Kumkumji.